Hello, Republic of Gamers, and welcome to ROG Pulse. This week we are talking about high refresh rate gaming, 300 hertz and beyond, as we are continuing to break the ceiling of what is possible in that field. My name is Solid Jake. I'm your host, and I'm joined here by Jeff Campman. Once again, Jeff, what is new?
You know, there's snow and there's more snow.
Oh, God.
And it's cold.
It won't stop.
Yeah. And I think we're scheduled. I forecast to get like 7 more inches on Monday. That's crazy.
Actually, same here. And we're in a very different part of the country. Well, not that different, but different enough. But it's just been endless. Playing any good games lately? Anything exciting?
I'm just trying to grind through Hades, man.
That's a good game to grind through. How far have you gotten?
It is. I think only as far as the 3rd set of bosses.
Okay. The Minotaur guy, the Minotaur and the okay.
Spoilers, but yeah.
Wow.
It's not a game you can spoil.
Not really. No.
Roguelikes you can't really spoil, but yeah.
Very fun game. I need to pick that up again at some point, because when I last played it, I just couldn't stop, and I had to unplug myself because it was just a little bit too addicting. Well, guys, we are diving into a full discussion on just the high refresh rate gaming. We're getting more and more. I mean, that's always been part of Asus. ROG, we've always been pushing the envelope as to how fast can a display go? What is the maximum refresh rate we can achieve? And that's always been a big focus here, as far as I can remember. I mean, back to 144 hertz, and then pushing to 165. What was the next threshold? 240 to 300, and then 360. We're kind of seeing these like 60-ish FPS jumps per evolution at this point. And you think about that and you look at it, you look at 300 versus 360 and you say, it's not that big of a difference. But then you take a step back and you say, wait a second, we're used to 60 FPS being the total amount that we have at any point. So it is actually a significant difference.
Yeah, and 60 hertz and 360 hertz, your display is refreshing 6 times as many times per second.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
That is crazy. Just as a personal feel kind of thing, when we've jumped from one generation to the next, what has been the most impactful to you in terms of like a feel? Was it like going from 60 to 144 or another generation?
I think it's largely dependent on what your first high refresh rate display is. Like moving from 60 to anything is going to feel better.
Right.
I back in the day, like I had, way back in like 2008, you couldn't get. There might have been like 120 hertz or 90 hertz LCDs around the periphery of gaming, but back in those days, everything was 60 hertz.
Yeah, pretty much.
And like CRTs were actually how you got to 85 hertz or some other odd multiple. But my first high refresh rate LCD was moving from just a 1920 by 1200 60 hertz monitor to one of our PG259Q G-Sync displays. And that was one of the first IPS panels to go to 165 hertz. And it was revolutionary. It feels so much better. Because when we talk about feel, every frame rates are refresh rates are such a contentious topic. Everybody who comes from like cinema is like, 24 FPS is how it should be. And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, you're not interacting.
Right. That's watching only.
Right. And your brain does a great job of integrating that stuff into moving images, into animation. But the moment you put your hand on a mouse, put your hand on the keyboard, start moving that around. If you're playing a game at 24 frames per second, you're like, this feels broken.
It feels so bad. Broken, as a lot of people use the term broken as good. We're not using it in that sense. We're using broken as literally my device is broken, because 24 FPS, 30 FPS, it feels, I mean, I challenge everyone at home to go into your display settings on Windows and change it just for a minute. You have to go to advanced display settings, change it down to 30, or change it down to 60 if you're on a 144 or higher display, and just feel how bad it feels in comparison. Feel it, not look, but feel. I mean, you'll notice the visually as well.
Yeah, and if you can cap your game's frame rate at 30 or 24 or whatever at the same time, it'll feel even worse.
Yeah, I'm not trying to make them hate their lives. I'm trying to give them a demonstration.
Yeah, because the moment like that whole phenomenon is end-to-end latency.
Right.
We talk about lag, we talk about ping times, we talk about lag, and everybody knows intuitively that more lag, higher ping, worse gaming experience.
Yep. It's
So, I mean,
that's the
it's
number
not
one.
just about, it's the motion feels, the motion looks better. And anybody who's gone from a 60 hertz TV to a 120 hertz TV knows this as well. But the time between hitting a key or moving your mouse on like even 144 hertz display versus a 60 hertz display, it just feels so much more alive and so much more connected.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because there's less lag between when that input is processed and when you see it on the display.
Just a neat little visual of the 60, 144, and 360 hertz in super slow motion.
Uh-huh.
This is recorded with a camera at 1000 FPS to be able to show exactly how much more detail you get. This is, this is meaningful for a few different ways. I mean, what are the main benefits of a higher refresh rate, Jeff, in gaming?
Yeah, I mean, I think it absolutely just, as we've said repeatedly, it just feels better. Like it feels more alive or more real. But I think if it depends, if you're playing a AAA game, for example, and you're just experiencing the ambiance of those games, like people can tolerate a lower refresh rate. But if you're a competitive gamer and you're looking for every new bit of information you can get as fast as you can get it, a display that updates 6 times as fast as a 60 hertz display is going to show you a more current picture of the action than your 60 hertz monitor, perhaps. And even versus 144 hertz, you have more. You just get more information, I think, is the way I would put it.
More information and slightly faster information. We're talking milliseconds here,
right.
But those milliseconds add up, especially when we're talking about esports and playing at the highest level.
Oh yeah. And this is so. Yeah, when you're playing an esports title, and I make no claims to be an elite esports gamer. I love Counter-Strike, but if in a game like that requires such intense precision, if you're already playing with I don't know, your fancy ROG mouse, your fancy ROG RX keyboard with the optical mechanical switches, you're already cutting all this latency out of your system. But you're like, oh, I'm going to keep playing on a 60 hertz display. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Because like the fastest that display can show you a new frame is every 16.7 milliseconds, right? So no matter what your frame rate is, and Counter-Strike regularly runs over like 300 frames per second, pretty simply. And your 60 hertz display can show you parts of those new frames because of an artifact known as tearing, where you have multiple image data from multiple frames on your screen at once. But that looks like crap, to be honest. So a 360 hertz display cuts that new frame time down to 2.7 milliseconds. So like
that's a huge difference.
Yeah, I mean, you're cutting there are other aspects to input lag as well. Like that's not the only part of input lag. There's all this processing that has to happen to generate a new frame. Obviously, you take your input, run it through the game engine, but that's a huge amount of time to cut out before you see new information. And because you're constantly, something I've noticed, if you're constantly adjusting like the position of your mouse, like the term I use is like painting your enemy with the reticle, like you're trying to constantly make all these micro adjustments. It's easier on a higher refresh rate display.
Well, as you said, because you have more information, it's refreshing that much faster.
Right. So yeah, I mean, I think it's an invaluable tool to just have. Like your hardware, when you buy new hardware, you upgrade your display, for example, like that's an advantage that you always have, all else being equal. You might sleep poorly before a match. You might eat the wrong thing before a match. You might have too much caffeine, not enough caffeine. Human performance factors as we all know, they're so variable. But if you buy an Advantage with new hardware, like you've just got that. You've got it in your pocket. And that was one of the really interesting things about the 360 hertz monitor, the ROG Swift PG259QN and the QNR. NVIDIA, our partners at NVIDIA have done human computer interaction studies that actually quantify this benefit. And so if you're doing flick shots where you have to move the mouse to like a certain point on your screen very quickly and very precisely, I think NVIDIA said the difference between a 60 hertz and 144 hertz is it's like 28% better. But you gain even more still. I mean, there is a smaller benefit, but as you keep going up in refresh rate, like those benefits keep stacking up. And like even the difference between 240 hertz and 360 hertz is still like a 4% benefit. And that might not sound like a lot, but when you're competing at an elite level where everybody is about as good, the fact that you can just go out and buy an improvement of that magnitude is super, super important.
You tell any athlete in any sport you can get 4% better results, and they're going to say how, and they're going to do whatever they can. It's just better shoes, anything, any way you can push the envelope for your performance. We're going to see that happen, and that's kind of like part of that endless pursuit of raising the bar with the amount of refresh rate we can achieve, but also lowering the latency as much as possible. Now, Jeff, one of the most common things I see when it comes to people that are monitor shopping or just talking about displays in general is mixing up or assuming that refresh rate and response time are the same thing. How do they go together?
So the refresh rate, I mean, the refresh rate is just the refresh rate. It's how many times a second can this display pull new data from the PC, from your graphics card's frame buffer. That is, it's related to, but it's independent from response time, which is actually a characteristic of the physical pixels of the display itself. Because like if you have an LCD monitor, right, there's little chemicals. There's little, there's for each pixel, there's a chemical layer that regulates the amount of light that's coming through and how quickly that physical material goes through the change to reach the appropriate light level for, the mix of red, green, and blue. That is essentially response time to arrive at that final image. And, that's all else being equal, you want high refresh rate, low response time as much as possible.
What is the lowest response time type of display as a category?
I think OLED.
Those are the fastest. What are the slowest? What are the worst?
So really old LCDs were awful. Really old desktop LCDs, yeah. In fact, they were so bad.
So bad.
Yeah, it was so bad that the monitor makers or panel makers invented a technology to make it better called overdrive, which speeds up the pixel response.
It was actually a dark age of gaming, I feel, because everything felt so we went from CRT monitors to these nice new flat panel monitors that felt like way worse in terms of response time. But anyways, it's how technology goes sometimes.
But our 360 hertz monitor, like I said, roughly it's refreshing once every, it can show you new image once every 2.7 milliseconds, ideally. We claim, I think, a 3 millisecond response time for that display. I'm not sure. So on average, that syncs up pretty nice.
Yeah, one to 4 millisecond is pretty much par for the course. I feel for most of these displays.
Yeah, any gaming grade monitor has to be below 5 milliseconds.
Yeah,
on average.
Yep.
Some transitions take longer than others, but we won't get into that.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, there's a lot of variables when it comes into size of the display and so on. Cool. So
the 360 hertz displays are an important milestone again because of the performance benefits for esports players. But we've been talking about latency all this time. It's like input latency, input lag, and unless you're a reviewer, a hardcore reviewer, or you're an esports talent development agency or a team, actually measuring how much time it takes for your PC to process your input and show it on the display has until now been the that's been
almost impossible.
Extremely specialized hardware. Like you have to wire up an LED to your main mouse button, get a high-speed camera, run it at like
a multi-$1,000 camera, right? Like this is not something anybody at home can just be like, oh, I wonder what my latency is.
Yeah. You can literally count the number of frames that appear on the display before, you see your gunfire or whatever. And even if you're an esports team, going through that whole process, dragging out all that equipment, specialized, monitor, specialized mouse, whatever, major pain in the butt. Takes huge amounts of time per measurement.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the other cool things NVIDIA did and that we implemented is created this technology called the Reflex latency analyzer. And so, each G-Sync display has a process. Each G-Sync display has a processor in it that controls the variable refresh rate. But the wizards over at NVIDIA actually thought, so we just said the way you measure this is to count frames. When does that change appear? When does your gun fire? And because this processor is actually controlling the output to the LCD panel, it knows when the gun muzzle flash appears or whatever. So, one thing led to another. And so now you can plug your mouse into this display with the Reflex latency analyzer, click your mouse. One thing leads to another. The display knows when your gun fires or when that display change occurs, and it can tell you the end-to-end latency of that process in milliseconds.
Right.
And you don't need any special hardware beyond the display.
Is it somewhat limited to which mice work with this, or is it any mouse?
I think there is a limited list. Our ROG Chakram Core is one of the ones that works, I know for sure.
Yeah.
I think you can actually see it there.
Yeah, that's it on screen.
Image. Yeah. And I think you can use non-certified mice with it, but again,
the certified mice are going to perform the best. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, it gives you all this useful data without all this external hardware. And so, not only do you get that great 360 hertz output, you can go into your PC, into your PC's round trip processing latency and say, okay, well, if this number is really high, I'm not benefiting from this as much as I could be. Then you can bring it down in a systematic way, which wasn't really possible before, unless, again, you're a hardcore hacker. So,
right. Very cool. Yeah, this is going to be an awesome tool. I mean, frankly, knowing exactly how much latency you have is going to be really beneficial just for mainly the high-end gamers. If you're trying to really become a pro gamer, you're trying to hit Grandmaster in StarCraft 2, you're trying to hit the highest rank in Valorant, which used to be called Valorant, and I don't know the new name of it anymore. This is the kind of thing that's going to help you identify where you want to make those improvements in your hardware. And, here at Asus, as you mentioned, we have been, pushing the envelope in any way, shape, and form beyond just displays. We've got optical mechanical switches on our keyboards now. That's something newer that we just started rolling out. That's going to bring down some latency from your keystrokes. So it really is kind of like nice to be in a place where we're starting to look at pro gamers, we're starting to look at esports and say, okay, we want to level up the gear in that direction. Before, for a long time, it felt like the pursuit was largely, just nailing down the nice graphics in a solid refresh rate and creating that good single player experience. But now we truly have devices that are geared towards competitive gaming, and it's been that way for some time now. But we can see really good growth in the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, this is a new domain of elite athletes, and I think a major question for this is like, do I need a 360 hertz monitor? I mean, I don't know. I can't give you
Okay.
a universal answer for that.
Let me at least just give
sure.
my personal review. It's like this past Monday, just a few days ago, for the very first time, I played on a 300 hertz display. One of our laptops, the new 2021 Strix G17, has a 300 hertz display, and just feeling that going from, I typically play on a 144 hertz 4K display, the XG27UQ. I am going from 144 to 300, double the frame rate, more than double. And just in Windows, like my first few minutes on the mouse was just like, whoa, 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 what? This is a thing that I can have? So yeah.
Yeah.
Do you need it? Once you touch it, you're going to be like, I don't want to go back to
Yeah.
144. I'll say that.
Yeah. And I think another good anecdote, like when we introduced this display about a year ago, when we were first showing it off to the public at CES 2020, is like everybody who came into the booth was like, oh, I don't really think I'm going to see a big difference. Then we had a 240 hertz display side by side with it, and everybody got up close to it, like, oh yeah, I can see. It's like,
there's less blur is probably the biggest thing that stands out, right?
One of them, yeah. But I mean, yeah, it doesn't. I think if you're, even if you're not an elite player, if you're just good and you just want the potential to take advantage of that, it's like we're exploring the edges of performance here. That's what ROG is about. It's performance without compromise. And if you're at all interested in being out there on the edge, I mean, it's just cool to have.
We actually have a question in chat, and you may or may not know the answer to this question, but what are the limitations with pushing a 360 hertz display towards what we have as the maximum for like an IPS panel, 360 IPS, 27 inches, 4K? Like, is that something that you see attainable in the near future, and why is that hard to do?
So I will say already, the 360 hertz monitor is an IPS panel.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. The PG259QN is already using IPS.
And it's 24 inches and it's 1080p.
Yeah. Right. And those choices make sense because if you're an esports gamer, you don't necessarily want something that's off in the periphery of your vision. You can't see the whole picture. Right. People like to get, I think something we noticed is that esports gamers like to get up real close to those displays.
They get up real close. 1080p is really common as the resolution of choice, and also it's easier to hit 360 hertz performance with your PC in 1080p. I think that's got to be a variable there.
Right, and so I think it's really when you start saying, okay, I want to up the resolution, I want to up the refresh rate, you do have to start thinking about things like how much bandwidth does my display cable have? Because like DisplayPort 1.4 or 2.0 or whatever, HDMI 2.1, all of these things have limitations. So that's an area of continuing development. But like the physical characteristics of the pixel or the LCD media itself, I mean, those are already there. We've already demonstrated it with the IPS panel in this thing.
That's true.
So I mean, it's just that's not really the bottleneck. It's even moving from 1920 by 1080 to 2560 by 1440, you start needing a pretty high-end graphics card.
Right. That is a very good point. I mean, even like a 3090, I'm curious how many games would be able to achieve the performance of 360, and the answer is probably World of Warcraft, Valorant, CSGO, Minecraft, it's, just a few titles.
And something else that's worth remembering, as refresh rates climb, and actually this is especially, you can really easily observe this phenomenon at 1920 by 1080, but it's true just as refresh rates climb in general. Because your graphics card is, it's taking direction from your CPU, right? It's not, there's certain amounts of work that's being offloaded to the GPU now, independently of the CPU, but like this CPU is still driving the show. And so if the really extreme example of this is like you throw an RTX 3090 in a PC with, I don't know, 5-year-old processor, you might not see a performance gain
at all
in your game of choice. Yeah. I mean, because your processor will be bottlenecking the graphics card.
Yeah.
And so, how fast that main game loop can run on the CPU is a major limiting factor that I'm not sure, people appreciate that as widely as they should. So, I mean, that's actually one of the biggest obstacles. Like, I can fire up CSGO on my PC over here today with, a higher generation graphics card, like an RTX 2080. And it still is like 1920 by 1080, 320 FPS, 2560 by 1440, 320 FPS.
Right.
And then, maybe if you get up to 4K, it starts going down. But it's like the CPU is the limiting factor.
Yeah, I mean, the number of times I've seen, friends of mine like go out and buy a new graphics card and slot it in a 6-7 year old machine. I'm just like, so when you upgrade it in the rest of it, because you're really not getting, the kind of performance increase that you think you are just by upgrading your graphics card. And that's a extremely common misconception with, gaming performance, is that everything is on the GPU, but realistically it depends on the game, but a lot of games even use more CPU. But anyways, that bottleneck is definitely something we see a lot of people deal with.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, like, your main game logic thread, the one that says this is what's happening, it's like you get stuck on the performance of a single core. It's not even about how many CPU cores you have. It's like, how fast can this one bit of serial code run on one CPU core? So, yeah.
Yeah.
One of my favorite topics.
No, it is. It's fascinating. And, we see a lot of people looking at this and, trying to achieve those better refresh rates. It's something that I'm always looking towards increasing. One thing that I'm pumped about is that we now have a generation of graphics cards that can achieve 4K 144 hertz. And, maybe we can push beyond that for other games as well, as we are and continuing to evolve things here. And of course, a big part of that is the technologies that are being created by NVIDIA. The softwares they're creating are, just adaptive sync is a big deal with gaming, to be able to give you that smooth, fluid experience.
Yeah, and it's good that you bring that up, because I think another misconception with displays nowadays is, like, if you can't hit 360 hertz all the time, then you're not getting your money's worth, and that's not entirely true. Because we have back in the old days, again, you had a fixed refresh rate. You had 60 hertz or bust. And to avoid screen tearing, you had to turn on VSync. And, that meant that meant several bad things, most notably that your game could not run any faster internally than 60 FPS. Whatever time step it was using was not faster than 60 FPS. So we were talking about input lag earlier. If your game can't run any faster than that, there's a significant amount of input lag as you wait for that next frame to be generated and displayed,
which feels bad.
Yeah, I mean, so there's input lag there, and that was something you could only fix by moving to a higher refresh rate display. But the other problem with VSync is that the granularity of, say I'm a graphics card, if I can't draw a new frame in 16.7 milliseconds, which equates to 60 FPS, I have to wait for another display refresh to happen, because if I don't, the screen will tear. And so suddenly this old frame is on the screen for two, 16.7 millisecond intervals. Your frame rate drops to 30 FPS and you get this big judder, right?
No one wants
input lag is even worse, right? And it only gets worse as performance gets worse. It's a big mess. But we now have adaptive sync. And so you have this incredibly fine-grained ability to vary the display's refresh rate in response to the natural variance in your frame rate over time. Like, maybe I have a 320 frames per second average in Counter-Strike, but my frame rate might rise to, I don't know, 355. It might drop to 290 or something.
You never feel a difference.
Right. Well, essentially, practically, yes. With the G-Sync monitor, you don't notice this. The game can run as fast as it can run. Your image quality doesn't degrade because of screen tearing. And you just have a wider range of, I guess, I don't know, refresh rates you can use to catch that data. And so you're seeing more of what you could, your computer is generating. It's not a total loss. And if you're playing a AAA game on a G-Sync monitor, you're not losing anything if it's not running at the peak refresh rate.
Right.
That's the whole point. You might notice like a slightly choppier animation as frame rates drop, but it still remains responsive. The input lag remains low, and your screen doesn't tear. So I mean, the image quality remains higher. It feels so much better. So you want as wide an adaptive sync range as possible. 360 hertz gets you there.
Yeah, just speaking of 360, we do have it on our PG259QNR. Did I get that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
QN and QNR.
Got it. Yeah, and
the QN doesn't have the reflex latency analyzer. The QNR does have it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So R for reflex.
Well, we also have it on the brand new Strix Scar 17, the G733, which is 363 millisecond response time. As full sRGB, adaptive sync, and 85% screen to body, as you can see here. This is a really cool, esports geared device. In fact, you can see we recently sponsored Misfits that's our team that we're partnered with, and XQC's on here as well. But it's there they are, Misfits. But it's got everything from optical switches on the keyboard. It's really got everything in here for just lowering down that latency across the board.
RTX 3080 mobile graphics, the Ryzen 9 5900HX CPU.
Legendary.
It's a beast. And so it's like, if you're used to 360 hertz display on your desktop, you can now go out and say, okay, well, I want this to be my esports laptop.
Yeah. And I actually even have the little brother of this device here, the Strix G17, which has a 3070 in comparison, has a Ryzen 9 5900 in it. Also, another amazing display, and that one is up to 300 hertz, so just a step below. But seriously, 300 hertz is a dream. I've yet to try 360. Soon, very soon.
Soon, TM.
Well, any final thoughts? Anything we didn't nail down here for our discussion on refresh rate?
Give me more of it.
Yeah,
that's basically how I think. I think the next, this is just going to be something that everybody keeps pushing. I think if you're really into this, a good site to check out is blurbusters.com. The Blurbuster in chief, I guess, is Mark over there, and he is he's just an authority on this stuff, and he has a compelling argument for refresh rates all the way out to 1,000 hertz. For conventional content.
1,000.
Yep. It still benefits.
If you had to guess, how many years before we hit 500?
That I don't know.
You don't even want to. You don't even want to take a stab at it.
I think it's possible, but I think it's possible within 5 years. I would say, because we're already seeing game engines that can go that far. I think we've seen there was some overclockers that took Doom Eternal up to 500 FPS or thereabouts.
I guess part of that conversation is how fast do graphics cards improve? What is the next series of NVIDIA cards going to be like? How far is it going to jump from the 30 series? So
we have all these technologies. We have all these technologies now where you don't have to render every pixel. So like the raw shader power is not as much of a limitation.
That's true. Yeah, like DLSS is huge. It's huge.
Yeah,
it's a game changer.
2.0. Yeah. So I mean, I think that we're just going to keep seeing this bar pushed up, and I'm here for it.
Yeah, me too. Very cool. Well, guys, this has been ROG Pulse. We do these shows every week talking about various topics. Thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to leave a comment below on YouTube or in Twitch chat if you guys have any specific topic you would like to see us cover in the future, as we have tons planned showing off our various new laptops and any kind of new devices we announce. Anytime there's an announcement from NVIDIA, AMD, or Intel, we're going to do a live show covering pretty much all the news there. And much more. It's a lot of fun, Jeff, just sitting down and talking and learning, and even more fun when I get hands-on with the devices.
Yeah, and there's more of that coming too.
Yeah,
every Friday.
I will have
every Friday
soon. Not tomorrow, but soon I will have my hands on that PG259QNR, the 360 hertz display, and we'll test that with some some fun games. Maybe some more Doom Eternal. I've really been digging that game. It is just so much better than the 2016 Doom, which was already a good game.
I'll fight you on that, but not tonight.
Okay. All right. I'll take the challenge. All right, guys. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time. GG's.